I think Zoo Med Laboratories is probably one of the most recognizable brands in herpetoculture. They've been around since 1977, and in 1993 were the first brand to actually produce UVB lamps specifically for reptiles. Later on in this episode, we're going to learn more about a Zoo Med product that is specifically designed for bearded dragons, so if you own a bearded dragon or you want to in the future, you will not want to miss this. Welcome back to the Animals at Home podcast. My name is Dylan. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today I'm speaking with Chuckey from MadBio Reptiles. You may follow him on Instagram. He has quite a large following there, and he is a zookeeper, so he's working with large crocodilians and monitors and whatnot. So he has some amazing content on Instagram. So I wouldn't be surprised if you already are following him. This was a really fascinating episode. Chuckey talks about working with crocodilians and monitors in the zoo setting, and he points out some really interesting factors that distinguish those two as far as their intelligence go and their trainability. And the only way I can put the way I see Chuckey working with animals, and I mentioned this to him at the end of the episode, is he has a very intuitive sense with them. And there are so many times in this episode that I'm like, wow, you nailed that. And I've never heard it explained that way. So we discuss, again, training with the crocodilians and the monitors, but we also talk about the reptile industry as a whole, how to be a keeper for conservation. How do you actually keep reptiles in captivity, but also promote conservation in a way that doesn't make it seem like we're just keeping the animals for the sake of keeping them? We discussed the invasive berm problem in Florida and importing wild-caught ball pythons. We really do cover a gamut. I have a feeling that this will frustrate some people. Some people won't actually like what Chuckey has to say, but I think a lot of what he said today is true, and these are conversations that we actually need to have. So I'm not going to say anything further. Let's just jump into the conversation. Enjoy. Well, Chuckey, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me over.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on. I think I'm trying to remember when we recorded when I was on the Reptiles with podcast with you guys. That maybe it was like a year ago or a little less than a year ago now. So it's been a while.
I think about a year. Yeah, it has to be about a year.
Yeah. And we had a great conversation there, and I see what you're up to on social media, and I think you have an interesting perspective. So let's start a little bit about your history. Are you born and raised Florida?
No, so I was born in Puerto Rico. I lived in Puerto Rico until I was 13 years old. And then in 2010, I moved to Florida. So I literally started speaking English like 2016, like
really?
public,
Wow.
talking to people in English. Yeah, like I could understand it and I could speak it, but I was just too scared. So like all those things happened very recently. And then, yeah, all the animal stuff, all the reptile stuff, all that started in Puerto Rico before I even got to Florida too.
So what was it like in Puerto Rico? Was there just, is it you're interacting with wildlife there, or were you keeping?
So it was very interesting because I always loved animals before I ever kept any. My grandmother lived in the mountains, so I got to see Puerto Rican racers and like native species. I didn't even think they were cool at the time. And then from there, like I lived in the city with my mom, but I was pretty much raised by my great grandparents. So those are already 3 different locations with different types of wildlife because I was in different parts of the island. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, my grandmother always had dogs in her backyard. There's like pink-tailed tarantulas, there was iguanas, there were amoebas, Puerto Rican boas, like all sorts of things just in her backyard because she lived in the mountains. She had like 10 acres at the time. So down there, it was just different. And then as I was going to school, all the friends that I would make somehow worked with animals, like their parents worked with animals. There was a guy when I was like 10 years old. His name was Louis, and his dad's name was also Louis. And they trapped invasive birds in Puerto Rico. And I learned to make the traps for the invasive birds. And it was like all types of finches and parrots and all sorts of things. And then from there, they started collecting iguanas because they're invasive there as well. And we can get into that later on as well. There's
yeah.
And then from there, I met this other guy. His name is Felipe. He lives in North Carolina now. But when I went to his house, his dad kept snakes illegally. Yeah, so he had ball pythons, corn snakes, all sorts of like exotic snakes that I had never seen before. And then with Felipe, I started learning more. I remember he had a leopard gecko, and I had never seen one of those. And I thought it was the coolest thing. Then he had a scorpion, and then in that house, I just started falling in love. And then me and him at the school was also on a mountain, would catch like Puerto Rican racers, iguanas. Then we started catching. Have you seen Herp Time? He has
Gosh, I
like
think it's been a long time.
he has tons of little geckos on Instagram, and they're
Oh,
called
yeah, Herb Time. Yes, yeah. Of course, Arm and stuff. Yeah, yeah. For some reason, I was thinking
Yes.
of I forget. I don't even remember what I was thinking of. But yes, of course, I know Herb Time. Yeah.
Yeah, so Herb Time, he has all this Pterodactylus. I
Mm.
used to catch those at the school. I did not know what they were at the moment. I just would catch them, and then we would take them home and like take care of them. Like I did not know what I was doing, mind you. But that's what I started as in Puerto Rico. Once I got to Florida, it went away for a little while because my mom didn't have much money. I didn't go outside much. Didn't have many friends. I didn't speak the language. And then through time, the first thing was the leopard gecko. I had a cottonmouth by accident. Didn't know what it was at the moment, and I would handle it. Corn snakes, ringneck snakes, and then from there just kept growing and growing, and then finally I started making money. My first job at 18 years old, and I started buying my own stuff. And then I try to be a ball python breeder. Is what I try to do.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that's pretty much a summary of all this stuff that has happened in between. And yeah, that's how I got here, and then that was the life in Puerto Rico.
That's amazing. So now that I see your Instagram content and hearing your backstory, some of it's kind of making sense because something that I see from you and your content is that you seem very fearless working with the animals, and even having a cottontail a cottontail. I was just talking about rabbits with my son, but a cottonmouth with a free handling a venomous snake without realizing it. Were you ever afraid of working with animals or catching these invasive birds or anything like that?
It depends. Like, not exactly fear. Like, whenever I would catch something, like, yeah, my heart is racing, but I was just adrenaline. Was I scared to shoot my hand? Yeah, but I was also scared to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did it. Like the cottonmouth, I remember the way I got it was with a net, and then I put it in a tank, and then like I grabbed it. That's pretty much it. I didn't know what it was until like I feel like a week later, me and my mom were Googling it, and we found it. We found out what it was because I didn't know what it was. I had never even seen a water snake or heard of a cottonmouth. I just had a snake.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy. You're so lucky you didn't take a bite.
yeah, and I was so young, so little. Like I could have died or lost something.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you tried to get into the ball python business. Did
Yeah.
that last a while, or was that kind of a crash and burn type situation?
So that lasted, I would say, about a year. And
Okay.
I always try to do YouTube and social media. That's another thing. I've always done it. There's videos of me like 10 years old recording in Spanish, by the way, with my leopard gecko. But I started doing ball pythons, and I started meeting people, and I just wanted to do it. I just thought that was the way to. I thought that's what I loved. I had an idea of it. I thought that I could be rich, and that's how I was gonna make money. I was gonna create all these morphs and all these things just like everybody else. And then one time, because I would like growing up, I also watch, of course, Steve Irwin, Brian Barczyk. And then one time Brian Barczyk said he was gonna be at a local park to me that I live 10 minutes from. It was Gatorland. And he posted that he was going to be there on Instagram. So I commented, I live 10 minutes away. And he said, come over. And then I went there, and then that's the first time with my brother, first time that I ever saw like giant alligators. And I was like, oh, this is a different ball game. Okay, like cool. Like I didn't think like, oh, I want to work here, but I was like, okay, this is cool. That's Brian. Amazing. Talk to Brian. Like my
I
friends
actually remember seeing that vlog. That's the first time I ever saw you. Actually, I think is in that because he recorded you, right?
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
That's insane. But yeah, I was 19 years old when that happened, and then I saw that place, and then at the time I was going through a lot of rough things. And that day, my stepfather got arrested, and then we didn't know how we were gonna pay bills and all these things. But I just literally washed my brain off, and I was like, okay, let me live in this moment. Once I get out of here, I'll figure it out. I was a year without a job. I didn't have any money.
Wow.
My dream was social media, and I thought I was just gonna make it in that year, and I didn't. So that day was like a highlight, and then coming out of it, I was like, okay, freak out. Got to get rid of all this, like the snakes and stuff. And it was hard getting rid of everything. And I like from there, I just went uh and I applied at Gatorland. And at Gatorland, they want you to do a show. They give you a script. They're like, memorize this, and then you're gonna present a show to us. I failed. And instead, I ended up working at a gas station, and I hated my life there. So I decided to apply again. I was like, nope, y'all motherfuckers, y'all gonna take me. Can I curse on this?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, y'all gonna take me. Like I'm gonna try again. But this time they offered me a different job with a team mostly with girls in a smaller place and smaller alligators to start with and stuff like that. And yeah, that's where I went. Ball pythons are not it. Everything else is.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty amazing to think. I mean, you had this vision of working at Gatorland or just working with animals in general, because you could imagine where your life could have gone, right? You're working at the gas station. You probably could have got even more, upset with the world, and who knows what path you could have gone down. But the Gatorland, like the lure of working with the animals was strong enough to say, like, let me get back in there. Let me try again. And how excited were you to land that position?
I was really, really happy, really excited. I made tons of friends there as well. And like from the first day, it was great. Of course, it didn't last long, but yeah, I was really excited. I was happy, and I had tons to learn. And I always knew, like, I don't only love reptiles. I love everything. Reptiles are just the easiest to me. That's the easiest thing to work with and learn about. Reptiles are just easy. Everything else is way too hard, way too complicated. I know about them. I can work with them, but I like the easy. As well, to work with, that is.
Yeah. Well, and that's probably a kind of an opposite reaction that many people would have. I think many people would prefer to work with mammals in the sense that they're more relatable to us, and there's a sense of ease there, training, and even emotionally, you can look at an animal, a mammal, and see that it's scared or happy. Where reptiles, that's quite often one of the reasons that they've been so abused over the years, is because we don't see them as easy or that connection. So how come you had that sense of ease or that connection with them? Is it just because how you grew up surrounded by them, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's growing up surrounded by them made them like not a big deal. Like it just wasn't a big deal. And taking care of them is way easier than taking care of most mammals, in my opinion, that is. So it was very easy to just get into that world. Like I didn't put mind to it. I didn't think like, oh, this is harder, this is easy. I just went in and that was it. If I had the option at the same time, like say like the Gatorland thing didn't happen and it was something with lemurs, which I also love, I would have done it. If it was dolphins, I would have done it. Like it didn't, to me, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what it was. I was like, whatever lands. Like I don't.
You just want to be with animals.
Yeah, it just happened to be reptiles. And I'm like, okay, gators. I never thought of gators. I never thought of taking care or working with gators. That was not something growing up that I was like, I want to do that. Not really. Like it was just like, oh, I get to do this. Okay, this is it.
So what was that like? At Gatorland, did you eventually have a responsibility of caring for the animals?
Yeah, so it started. I did multiple things. I did. So it started with photos. So I allow people to hold an alligator. Also, attendance of people whenever guests came in, I let them in. And then from there, I started doing shows there. And then doing projects. Projects is pretty much cleaning everything, taking care of everything, giving food. The shows, of course, I'm in front of people talking about the animals. I made my own scripts. And then from there, within a few months, I became the lead of that team. And again, led by girls, and the rules were very strict. I'm gonna say it, but it was because they were mostly girls. They have a thing for that here in Florida. Like girls are not allowed to do certain things. Now I was like with a bunch of girls and I'm like, okay, like I'm not allowed to do stuff because I'm in this team and they're girls. And I'm like, I don't care. So I started breaking rules and I started teaching myself different things like training. They didn't teach me much training other than training the alligators to stay in the water and come up. That was it. That was it. But then we learned, I learned desensitization. So touching around the face and the teeth and the tongue without getting bit, teaching them to not close their mouth when that happens. I did that myself, like on my own. And then from there, I started teaching other people to do it as well. Different forms of training, um,
How do
crawling
you do
by.
that? I mean, I can, that seems very, I don't even know what the word would be, but that sounds, I guess terrifying is probably the correct word. Like, getting in their mouth and teaching them not to snap their jaws shut. How do you even begin to work with something like that?
So the way I did it, I feel like the first time wasn't like that. I knew other people that have done it. Like I knew it's possible. So I was like, okay, I can do it. If somebody else did it, I can do it. So I would look at people like Chris Gillette. Chris Gillette does a lot of stuff. He swims with his gators and touches them. I'm like, okay, things are possible here. Like this is nothing new. Like I'm new to it. The act of it is not. So I asked a lot of people. I asked a lot of questions. One of my friends and coworkers, Christian at the time, I didn't know him very well. I met him actually with Brian Barczyk when I went to Gatorland because he also worked there. And now he was working at the park that we work at now. In where I work at now, that's what we do. So I asked him, I was like, yo, can I go and see you do the thing? I want to see the thing. And then she showed me and we talked. And then I went back to work and I just mimicked everything I heard. I just mimicked everything I was told and got away with it.
So are you putting your hand into their mouth?
Yeah. And then, but like when I first did it, it was not a big animal. It was a spectacled caiman about this big right here.
Yeah.
So did I get bit? Yes. Like nothing, it wasn't major, probably have like some marks on my thumb at most. Yeah. And I worked with that little tiny spectacled caiman. Like it wasn't a big deal because it's a small animal. And once I learned with that, with the big ones, it's a little bit tougher to this day. Like I'm not risky with it. Like I don't, the big ones, I don't put my hand all the way in. I lost you there for a second.
Yeah,
You hear me?
you're good. Yeah. I heard that last part. Yeah, you don't put your hand all the way in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good thing. I mean, you don't want to you can only make that mistake one time.
Yeah, no, I don't mess with that. I have rules in my head too that I don't break because if I break those rules, I die. It's how I put it. It just took time, but I don't think I was scared. I don't think I was very scared. I think I knew it was possible, so I wasn't scared. And also my team was very like, do it. Like my boss, she supported me in everything. She was like, do it. You can do that. You can get away with that. Go ahead. Like, I don't care. Go ahead. And I just kept getting farther and farther and farther and getting away with more and more and more and more until there was nothing else to learn.
Wow. So that's what I'm curious about. Now you're working in a new park, but you still work with some major, huge animals and some large monitors and whatnot. I'm curious, like, what is your sense of their intelligence when you're working with them? Because you obviously, if you're doing these things with them, sort of desensitization and whatnot, you have a deep level of trust with them. Would you think that they're like the same as a dog or somewhere? Where do you put them?
They're not like a dog. They are not in the same realm. It's different. It's like I do a show every single day. We do it twice a day with an American alligator that's about 14 feet. He listens. He comes up. He holds. We can touch his teeth. We can touch his nostrils, his eyes, his ears. I kiss him at the end of the show. I literally put my head to his and I kiss him at the end of the show. Sometimes he jumps and tries to get me. Those things happen, and that's the best. That's when I have the most fun. I think like it depends what animal we're talking about as well. Monitors, whole different thing. Crocodilians, whole different thing. I think crocodilians, they're animals of habit. So if things happen over and over again, they memorize it and they learn, if I try to bite this guy all the time, I don't get him and I don't get food. So they start doing it less. That's not to say he's not going to try it if you give it a chance.
Right.
Like a lot of times when you see an alligator, like the guy in New York that got his alligator taken away, that's super tame, the alligator's deformed.
Yes.
The alligator has not had sunlight. The alligator is not good. A lot of these social media people that post their alligators, if they look white in coloration. Their teeth are pointed outwards. Heads are wide. We call them hamburger heads. Those alligators are kept cold, no UVB, no sunlight. So they pretty much get a form of MBD.
Mm.
Those animals tend to be very calm. That's how those people get away with it. But an alligator that is naturally kept, they will always try if you give them a chance. If you put your hand in the wrong place, their eyes are on top of the head. If you touch the bottom jaw the wrong way, they don't know what's there. They can't see it. They just feel something there and they're going to bite. And once they bite, they will take something.
Yeah, they will.
So I think they're intelligent. Absolutely. They can learn words and cues and like different things. You can train them to do many different things. They can get used to you touching them. They can get used to you laying on them. They can get used to you swimming with them. All of those things can happen, but they're not like a dog where they're going to seek your attention in that way. Mm. That's at least how I see it. Because of course, if a female has a nest, no matter how nice that female is, if you get close to that nest, you're dead. Like it's gonna try and kill you.
Yeah.
Like all of those things switch. So I think it's not like a dog. It's not stupid. It's somewhere in between. Chris Gillette says something like that all the time about them. They're not killing machines. They're not domesticated. They're right in between.
Yeah.
They're their
that's
own.
A perfect way to say it.
Yeah, they're their own thing. They're completely different from dogs or humans. They're their own thing. And you working with them, you have to understand that because if you don't, you die. That's one of the rules.
Yeah, yeah.
The trust thing, I don't trust them. They trust me. I respect them.
Mm. That's a big distinguishing difference.
Yeah, like they trust me. They know I'm not hurting them. They know I'm not going to mess with them. They know I'm okay to approach. I don't know he's not trying to kill me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's always like an air of having a guard up with them. You cannot turn your back. You got to stay focused on the task.
Exactly. And like reading their body language all the time because they get excited. Like imagine like they're in captivity. A lot of times they're just floating around all day. When they see me, I bring in a rabbit. He's coming in excited. Once he's excited in that way, he's coming in full force. He doesn't care what he catches at this point. He wants the rabbit. He's going to jump. His mouth open, eyes on top of the head, nostrils on top of the head, opens his mouth. You're not there. And like they can't see you.
Yes. Yeah.
He just jumped up and tried to catch something. If that's you, it is what it is.
Yeah. It doesn't make a difference to him.
Yeah. So I think also it's very hard because they are pretty social animals. They have tons of ways to communicate. They have bellows, grunts, they hiss, they make a jaw pop, so they open their mouth and close it very loudly. And sometimes they do a little nibble on one another. If they want the other one to back up, he's gonna go bam, back up. The other one has armor. They have scoot and osteoderm. The other one gets bit a little bit, does not get through. The teeth don't go through if they get the scoots because it was light. He gets away. If an alligator is gonna tell you to get away from it, with a little bit of a bite, you know?
That's not good.
Yeah, that's not good. You're going to take it the same.
Yeah.
So very important to know those things, especially with crocodilians. Now, monitors, it's a little bit of a different intelligence there because crocodilians are usually ambush hunters. So they sneak around to get their prey. They memorize the patterns of prey. They don't like chasing too much. They wait for things to get close to them. Monitors can chase. They can climb, they can dig, they can run, they can swim. Like they have to be a lot more up there, aware of anything moving. Any movement that goes around, they're always looking, very aware in comparison to the crocodilian that is also aware, but doesn't react to it as much with a monitor. They react, they're looking, they're paying attention. They remember certain movements. And they can learn a lot too. You can train monitors, absolutely. But I feel like they have a different way, or a different section of intelligence for them. Mm. They also learn patterns, of course. They also want to get the food from you, and they're going to approach. They can be pet. Those monitors can become so desensitized. You can pet them. They come up to you. You can touch their hands, grab them, like pick them up. whatever, and they know you're just not hurting them and they don't mind it. So I feel like with them, it's a lot more closer to domestication. So of course, not like dogs, but they're their own thing closer to that side than alligators and crocodiles are.
Right. What are some of the species that you work with for on the monitor side?
So we have two Asian water monitors, crocodile monitor and black-throated monitor.
Okay, yeah, so the big ones.
Yeah, the big ones. And then soon, hopefully, Komodos as well.
Okay, that'll be fascinating. Do you have a favorite of the species that you currently work with?
Crocodile monitor.
Yeah, everybody says it.
Well, I used to not. I used to not even care about them until I started working with them. But yeah, crocodile monitor is my favorite. And it's because like I started thinking about it. Like I worked with them and I was like, okay, I like this a lot, but why do I like it? It's a monitor that can run, can climb, can swim. It's smart, long claws, long tail. It has everything of every monitor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It
like the
just
ultimate combination.
Yeah, it's like big enough to be impressive, fast, big claws, long tail, prehensile tail. They can swim like a water monitor. They can be on land like a Komodo. They can climb like a tree monitor. It's just the perfect monitor.
Yeah. Yeah, they are amazing. I was just talking to someone on the weekend actually who has one, and she was just like, yeah, they're incredible. And so speaking of that, you're working with them in a zoo setting, both the crocodilians and the monitors. These are large animals. A lot of times these animals do end up in private collections and in the reptile trade. So I'm curious, you'd already kind of mentioned where things go haywire with crocodilians. We see that quite often, but what are your thoughts with people keeping these animals privately? Is it like they should absolutely not keep them? Is there some gray area? I mean, you work with them in probably basically a optimal setting and you see what people do with them privately. Where do you sit?
There is a gray area. I think, at least in the United States, there's some states that don't even have laws on them. I think that's wrong. I think that is not cool. I think that's horrible. Sometimes people even have them at reptile shows. Anybody can buy them. I don't agree with that. People at the reptile shows sometimes have Nile crocodile, the second largest reptile in the entire world.
Yeah.
Nile crocodiles that are more than capable of taking somebody's life, but that's not what happens usually. Usually is the crocodile's life that ends up going downhill because of it. Because nobody has what it takes. Most people don't have what it takes. So I think the fact that those places don't have laws is wrong. And there should be some laws. There should be some restrictions on that. And I know a lot of people fight me on that, believe it or not. With the industry, people fight me on that because people have the right to own whatever they want. No. When it comes to another life, it is a privilege to even work with that. Like that is just a huge privilege as it is. So I don't agree with that. Now, in Florida, you need a class 2 permit for alligators and most caimans except for the black caiman. So class 2 pretty much means you need 1,000 hours working with the animal. That takes about a year working with the animal. And then they check your house. If you have less than 5 acres, I think it is, you cannot have a crocodilian larger than 4 feet. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
If you have 5 acres, then you can have a larger alligator or a larger caiman. I think with class 1, you need, I think, 1,000 hours as well. And then you need the piece of land. Also, you have to be open to the public or it has to be for educational purposes.
Right.
So I do agree with that. I think if you push yourself to work with them, learn about them, get the permits, get the government involved, get the proper enclosure, get all of those things, get yourself in the world of what it is to keep a crocodilian. I think it's very possible, especially because in Florida, you have to do it for educational purposes.
Cool. Well, so if somebody, I think that those regulations do make a lot of sense for Florida. I think, especially when you're talking about something that's like a crocodilian, that could be, potentially dangerous. As far as both crocodilians and monitors, if somebody were to keep some of those larger species, what do you think are some things that they absolutely have to have within their husbandry, within their care to make sure these animals are actually not dying a slow death, as you alluded to?
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with that is enclosure size. I've seen people keep monitors in vision cages for some reason, like large monitors, like water monitors. Don't understand it. Don't like it. Like, I just disagree with that. I don't like the enclosures because they don't have what they need to exercise and perform the behaviors they do perform in the wild. I disagree with that. I don't like that. For crocodilians, same thing. I mean, that's one thing that I do disagree with the law. The enclosure requirement for a crocodilian and an alligator in Florida is that the crocodile or the alligator has to be able to turn around without touching the walls.
Wow.
That is the requirement. I disagree.
Tiny. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that requirement. That is horrible. So it's not for the care of the animal. You know, it's like that's not, I don't know. I just don't agree with that. So I think enclosure size is big. Like, you better have what it takes. If you want a Nile crocodile, you better have Nile crocodile money and Nile crocodile land, you know?
Yeah.
Like, of course, we have people like YouTubers like Chandler's Wildlife. He has venomous snakes. He has crocodilians, but he has the land. He put in the time. He learned. He was a alligator wrestler at one of the tribes. Same thing with Stone, one of his friends. One of my friends as well. Like, he has Nile crocodiles, but he has Nile crocodile land. You know,
Yeah.
They have what it takes. I have nothing against that. Like, you're taking care of an animal that otherwise would be somewhere probably horrible, and you're giving it a great life, and you're educating people on the animals. Great. I'd have nothing against that.
Yeah. And I'm sure having access to real sunlight is pretty vital for an animal that large. I mean, I just can't imagine having to replicate the sun inside with UV bulbs and whatnot. It just sounds like a nightmare.
That's what people, I don't even think zoos outside of Florida should have them. Because the same thing happens every single time. Not outside of Florida, but outside of the southern United States. Because all of them end up with the same problems. The MBD, the deformation of the face, teeth sticking out. Like, it always stunts them. They just don't do good without the sun. Like, there's no light bulb for them. There's no way.
As any reptile keeper knows, proper nutrition is a cornerstone of animal welfare in captivity. That's why I want to take a quick minute to tell you all about ZooMed's Dragon Food. Dragon Food is a specialized diet for bearded dragons. It comes in 2 formulations, one for juvenile animals and one for adult animals, and it is the result of 3 years of research and development. It is the first pet food to use green banana flour, which is a pesticide-free wheat alternative, which is low in sugar, and it's also a natural source of resistant starch, which feeds the microbiome in your dragon's gut. The product has a satisfying crunch, which simulates natural prey. As I already mentioned, it's wheat-free, it's also soy-free, and it uses real black soldier fly larvae for a high calcium protein source. If you own a bearded dragon and you're looking for a way to add some variety to their diet, please check out ZooMed's Dragon Food. For more information on this or any other ZooMed product, make sure you head to zoomed.com or check out the link in the show notes or the YouTube description. So yeah, no, I completely agree. I think we can give captive reptiles the proper lighting, but when you're talking about something that's hundreds of pounds and huge, I just don't think it's possible. So I think using the sun is going to be a necessity. Do you keep reptiles yourself right now, or are you just zookeeping?
So I'm also a keeper. I have let me see, where do I start? Rainbow boa, forest dragons, California king, Texas rat, rhino iguanas, giant day geckos, crested geckos. Those are outside. Night anoles. What am I missing? The forest dragons. Oh, I have a whole bunch of tarantulas as well. I have a whole wall of tarantulas in my living room.
Oh, wow. So you have a lot. I remember when we did that Reptiles With podcast, I think one of the ways you were introduced you were introduced to me was that you really hated the reptile hobby. So I thought that you probably didn't keep anything really. But I think we'll get into some of those reasons. But so you are a keeper. You just see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think I've gained different. I've been in so many worlds of the reptile community that I have morphed my own way of seeing it. I've been behind. Of course, I keep myself. I've seen how other people's keep. I am a zookeeper, been to many zoos. I've worked with other zookeepers in other zoos. I have been herping, so I find snakes and animals in the wild and I see how they live. I've traveled to do the same. Um, I've seen. I also work for a reptile shop, so I see that side as well. I see almost every single side of it,
Hmm.
and I just morphed my own views on it because of that. And I feel like most people in the industry are only part of one small circle, and that's why they
Totally.
don't like me. That's why a lot of people don't like me, is because they're in that one circle. But a lot of times, those same people, once we have a conversation, they can see where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So how do you reconcile the keeping captive animals? Because I'm sure you, like you said, you see them outside, you see the going herping outside, you see the wild animals, you see them in the zoo setting, and you see the commercial side. So I'm sure you've maybe seen your fair share of negative things that happen on the retail side, or whether it's imports or things like that. How do you keep animals at home and think this is okay to do?
A lot of the animals I keep, I was given to. Some of them are invasive, so I have them for that reason. I go down south, catch some, and then I keep them, and then I teach people about them, and I do little shows here and there with them. Other ones, of course, are animals that I like. That's pretty much a selfish reason, and I
Hmm.
think most people keep for selfish reasons, and that's okay. I just admit that it's also selfish.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I and there's ways to keep them. Now, I don't show many of my enclosures because I'm always growing and I don't like the enclosure that I have right now. So that is one thing for me. I'm not going to show you something I don't want you to do.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think a lot of my enclosures should be bigger and they just keep getting bigger and they should be getting bigger than this. I should have a whole wall with two enclosures.
Yeah.
Like I want to be able to do that for the animals. With the imports, it really depends on the species. Of course, a lot of animals are in decline, and part of the reason is the pet trade. Uh, for those animals, I don't really like keeping those or supporting that. Um, of course, deforestation is number one usually in those things. But whenever the pet trade is very heavy on those animals as well, I don't like it, so I stay away from those. So it's very species specific, in my opinion.
Yeah. The other day you had posted a video or a reel on your Instagram of a black racer just like zipping through the forest. And that's one of those things where you see that species and how insanely fast it moves, like, like
Mm-hmm.
30 meters in, a couple seconds. And you think, as amazing and as cool as that species is, it would just be so hard to, and I'm sure that maybe there are people listening to this that keep them.
Yep.
It's just so hard to see that and then wonder how you could put it into an enclosure. That's a
Yeah.
balance that needs to be struck.
Yeah, that is a fair way of looking at it. And that's one of the species that did it for me. Because I remember one time I was going through a forest and I saw a black racer periscoping. So head up, right? And then I had ball pythons and racks, and then I will open the rack and they will try and do the same thing. But then I will close the rack and they're still in there trying and pushing. And I'm like, that is horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to perform a behavior that I just saw a snake do in the wild, and it can't do it because what I keep it in is so small.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of that. So that's when I'm like, okay, like I don't like certain things, don't like certain ways of keeping animals. And that's one big one is I want to keep things and they should be able to perform the behaviors that they perform in the wild. And a lot of times we don't allow that. And that's a problem that I have. And even with like I'm a hypocrite. Like don't get me wrong, like I'm not perfect. Like animals are not kept perfectly. I just think like I should head in that direction, but also I feel like everybody should be aware of it
Mm-hmm.
and to head on that direction as well. Like corn snakes, for example, a common snake that people keep. I found them very high up in trees. People keep them in racks.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand that. I don't understand because of course, like people are like, oh, it's only for breeding. So for breeding purposes, it's good. No, like the experience of the animal is still the same. Whether it's
Yes.
breeding or keeping, the experience of the animal doesn't change.
Yeah.
That is just an excuse. That's just an excuse. People have to sound better or make themselves feel better. And I understand you want to make money, but I don't care if you make money, honestly. I I'm here for the animals. I'm here because I love animals. I'm not here to defend your pockets. Like, I don't care for your pockets. And that's just me. I don't, that's another thing. Like, I'm not a breeder. I don't sell reptiles. How I sold, of course, but I'm not like a big seller or anything like that, you know? So like, I'm somebody like, I joke around. I say I'm immortal because people can't just be like, don't buy from that guy because it doesn't, there's nothing to buy. So I can say these things. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Because that is my opinion. That is because I have been outside and I have seen these things. And people that at first disagree with me, I take them out, right? See some wild animals and I explain what they're looking at. They also go, oh, wow. Like, didn't expect that. Like one of the podcasts we almost recorded with the reptiles we were in this area. There was a huddle with hundreds of alligators, wild alligators in the back. And they were performing crazy behaviors like jumping for fish and all this stuff. And then I'm like, imagine that big animal in a little huddle that people keep them in sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, having the wild experience definitely shifts the perspective, and I think you're right. I mean, that's the conversation that I try to have on this show, is that we're not all perfect, we're not all keeping in the best way possible, but the conversation should also, basically start with the fact that yes, this is a selfish endeavor to many extents. There are benefits to the animals that we keep, but we also have to admit that we love animals and we think it's amazing that we get to interact with them on a daily basis in our bedroom or wherever you are, and that's really cool. And so we start with that, and then we go, okay, well, how do we improve the care for these animals that we're keeping, rather than quite often, and maybe this is where we can go into the tangent on invasive species and USARK Florida and whatnot, is quite often it gets, as you had mentioned earlier, it gets shoved into it's my right to keep, and then we just eliminate all the welfare with the animal.
Exactly.
And so it's just a matter of the conversation. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all keeping reptiles, but it's the intent that you have, I think, is very important.
Exactly. I think, I feel like that's missing in the community, and I wish it wasn't, because that's like, we could be a huge part of why animals live, and we're not.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think it depends to like where you come from. If you come from a breeder standpoint, you're gonna have that view. And if you're not open to like, don't even listen to me. Go outside. Go outside and you will see for yourself. But if somebody doesn't go into breeding or keeping reptiles and go straight to wildlife, those people usually have a horrible view of keeping. Why? Because they saw how they lived first, and then they saw how you kept them. They knew what they needed first. They saw every behavior, and then they see how you keep them.
Yeah.
And then they come at you, and then you want to defend yourself like, no, this is the way because of this and that. They saw how they lived. They saw how they were thriving, and then they saw your shoebox.
Yes.
And that's how you have those two groups fighting each other. Because these people have experienced them in the wild, and these people have only experienced them in tubs or small enclosures. Two different experiences that both matter. Both matter. But if you put those two together, these people know how they live in the wild. You can breed them and keep them alive. Like, put the two together. But people, there's a thick line there between those two groups of people. And usually a lot of these people could be like animal rights activists, which a lot of times crazies, right? But sometimes they don't exactly have bad points.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I get you care about the animal just like me, and you've seen differently than me. You've experienced differently than me.
Yes. Yeah, and it's funny too, because a lot of the species that we keep in the hobby are native to North America, or the United States, or less so in Canada, obviously, where I am. But you can actually, in fact, go outside and take a walk through a park and get a sense of the environment and actually see those animals in the wild and see how they're behaving. And yeah, you're right. That line is very thick between the two, and the thinner we make it and the more transparent we make it, I think we can make it a lot of a much better hobby and a more responsible hobby, and people would have a lot more respect for what we do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that too. Like, if somebody walks in my house and they see a whole bunch of rats that does not know anything about reptiles, it just looks trashy. It's like, yo, what the hell is this guy doing? If I have some dope enclosures, they're not even going to question it. They're like, oh, this is really cool. That is The view already is better. The way people, non-reptile people view you would be already better, which helps, especially if you're trying to fight laws or anything, whatever you're trying to do. Second, the animal has a better life. The cons is you can't breed as much and you don't make money.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
not really.
Now, what about the like we can use the Burmese python situation in Florida as a good template here. This is a pretty classic one. Quite often, the hardcore keepers will say this wasn't the pet trade's fault. This is something that just kind of happened because a hurricane brought them out or something like that. You're there, you live there, you hear both sides. What are your thoughts on this?
So, first of all, the hurricane they blame is Hurricane Andrew. Berms were found before the hurricane hit.
That's a problem.
All right. They were found before the hurricane hit. So what's the excuse then? Okay. They're like, oh, but more were that the big population came from after the hurricane. Whatever you say. That is just one example. We have 500 invasive species in Florida. A lot of them are reptiles. Right? You have the green iguanas, spiny tailed iguanas. We've had elephant trunk snakes, red-tailed boa, veiled chameleons, panther chameleons, Jackson chameleons. This sounds like a reptile show to me.
Yeah.
You know? Like, oh yeah, the invasive species are the same ones we all keep.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah,
somehow.
exactly.
I understand like brown anole, smaller lizards. Yes, they came through boats and plants. Absolutely. But you can't tell me a berm came through plants. Like, or the iguanas. Can't believe it. Like I just can't. I just can't. There's people that find like where I work, we get sulcata tortoises that people find on the streets. I have found sulcata tortoises on the street, redfoot tortoises. There's a population of Nile monitors. How do you think those got here?
Yeah.
A hurricane, or they came on a boat? You know, like people try to point fingers everywhere else so that nobody blames the industry, but it's like, come on, bro, really? Are you kidding me? That's what we want to blame.
And it is tough with Florida because, I mean, the reason those animals are, I mean, Florida kind of has two issues. The first is that it was really the hub of the reptile industry, you know, in those early days of the massive importation, like that, and New York. And then New York obviously has the added benefit of the winter time and anything that escaped and people releasing animals, they're not going to survive. Where Florida has the import is massive, and then the perfect climate for almost any reptile. Exactly. And it's a boom.
Exactly. And if you were to do research, a lot of like the random reptiles, like a water monitor shows up. Look at the area where it's found. Usually it's near those places. You know, usually it's near somebody's facility or something. So like maybe it escaped, absolutely. But the releases also happen. And a lot of people try to fight that off or whatever, but it's like Florida's not the only example. That is like, we're all humans. We make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
Spain has California king snakes.
Yes.
And Canary Islands.
Yeah.
How did they get there? A boat?
Yeah.
You know, a hurricane hit them? No. Obviously, people are keeping and releasing there. Now, where I'm from, Puerto Rico, hundreds of invasive birds that I used to catch. Right. Where did they come from? Where did the birds come from? We have macaws in Florida, by the way. Also really? The pet trade. Yeah, we have macaws in Florida. We have macaws. We have Quaker parrots.
The reptile doesn't even get started on the fish.
Yeah. Oh, lionfish, snakeheads. Like, we can't act like the reptile industry is really that much different than the rest of the world.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it isn't. Right now, Puerto Rico, they brought up their reptile keeping. Like, more people started keeping reptiles down there. I met a whole bunch of people when I was a kid that had reptiles. We have berms. They have retics.
Wow. Like, do they have wild retics there?
Wild retics. I'll say I was about to send it to you earlier. I wasn't sure if you were aware of that. But
no,
I know a guy right now. I know a few guys that get 6 retics a night.
Really?
Giant retics.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
In an island. How did the retic get there?
Yeah.
Reticulated python, green iguanas, of course. Spectacled caiman, because the
Wow.
pet trade there also blew.
Yes. So what do you think? Like, what do we do about that? Because I to me, the only thing I think the only starting point is, yes, we take responsibility. We can't keep kind of trying to pretend that didn't come from us. Yes, it did. But is there any way to solve these problems, or is this something that you just, like, Florida is such a wildfire example because of how crazy it is there? Do we just have to let it happen and just, hey, that we'll make some regulations to try to avoid this from happening in the future?
I think the problem is, it's a huge problem, because I don't think we can ignore it, and we can't just let it happen. It already happened, but we can't let it get worse, and it can't. People are like, oh, they can't move more north. It's too cold. I keep crested geckos outside.
Yeah.
It gets 40 degrees. They're fine.
Right.
I was told they couldn't go under 60.
Or above 80.
Yeah. And they're out there at 100 degrees.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to listen to a whole bunch of people that keep them at a certain temperature and tell me that they cannot live in the cold, because we don't know. I'm not going to, that's another thing of keeping. I don't even listen to people anymore, because everything is it's a box. This is the set temperature. This is everything's a box.
Yeah.
Where in reality, nature doesn't care about what temperature the animals should be. Like wherever they are, it might change. Elevations change. Like you might have a care sheet all you want, because that's how you learn, by keeping them. But you might not know what they can deal with in the wild. So I don't really trust it. So I think a lot of those animals have to be worked with, of course. And sadly, a lot of times is hunting. And honestly, it might suck, but I think we should be the ones doing it.
Yeah. Like starting to clean up that mess.
That would be a way to fight back. Because right now they're trying to fight over the iguana stuff. They're saying like, oh, we used to collect 1 million iguanas every year. Now you guys only kill 17,000 a year. First off, where's the paperwork to show the government that there were 1 million iguanas leaving? I don't know if they even have that,
So is that somebody was like, was that the reptile trade saying we would collect that many iguanas?
Daniel from USARK, Florida.
Okay. Yeah.
That just recently happened. I saw the video today. Like, did it happen? Maybe, but like, you're just telling me. I can't just take your word. Like, if I'm FWC, I can't just listen to you and be like, oh, that's a fact. Like, you have to prove that that's true. And then you're sending the animals out alive. What I have noticed with that, which somebody from FWC, who I don't like, had said, whenever that market was open for iguanas to be sent out of state, right? And sell them in state too, which I think was a problem as well. Selling them out of state. If I am a trapper and I'm trapping iguanas, that's my business. I make decent money selling them out of state. I'm taking care of my family. Do I want the iguanas to run out?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, because that's my living now. So you're just building, like, yeah, they'll be controlled, but you just, that is not a solution that anybody wants to hear. Like, oh, you're just going to make money to help, when in reality, you're going to let the population just grow, because you're just catching the babies, letting the adults keep breeding. That way you catch the babies next year. It's like,
it doesn't make sense to, you're essentially mining a diminishing product, and you wouldn't want to do that. Yeah,
and if they did it, I don't think it's a bad thing either. I just think it's just a sneaky way of doing it, I feel like also you'll be sending animals to homes that are probably not going to be able to take care of them. They said 1 million iguanas out.
That's what I was thinking. Where are those going? How could 1 million households absorb an iguana?
Who can take care of an iguana?
Very
1 million
few.
people yearly? I don't know about that.
No, that seems crazy.
I don't think so. So it's like, you're sending that's just profit. We're just talking profit then, So I think if we were, as a community, to build something to where we were the ones hunting them, which sucks, that really sucks. But if we were to be the ones hunting them, and we profit out of it, and then they want to come at us for whatever loss, would be like, we're the ones taking care of the problem. We caused the problem and we're the solution.
Yeah, we're
But
cleaning it up.
I don't think nobody wants to do that.
Are you allowed to just go grab an invasive chameleon off a tree and bring it home, or is there regulations as far as like who can capture invasive species?
So it depends on the invasive. Of course, if they're illegal, like the berm and the iguanas and all that, I'm pretty sure depending on where you are, you can just grab them, but then they're yours. And if they're illegal, you're supposed to kill them.
Right.
If you catch any of the invasive that are not illegal, yeah, you can just go down, catch them, and bring them back, and you can sell them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, you can't be caught having a berm.
Yeah. But if it was dead, nobody would care.
Right. Yeah.
But so any of the other ones, sorry.
You had, you had mentioned USARK Florida, and I know you've butt heads with them before, and I think you guys even had. I think his name's Daniel, as you said, or
yeah.
Is he? Yeah, you had him on the podcast with you guys, and you had a little debate. Can you kind of give people who didn't watch that, or just in general maybe aren't super familiar with USARK or USARK Florida, just some of the bullet points where you like, what are the things that you disagree with them on? I'm sure we already covered a couple of them, but are there some other things that you would want to mention?
I think USARK Florida, the idea of them is not bad. I think it's good. Like what they want to do is good, and they are the only thing fighting for the privilege of keeping reptiles. And that's where I start having a problem, is when people say it's the right to keep. A right cannot be taken away. This can. That is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I told that to Daniel. Daniel decided to instead call them freedoms. The freedom to keep. Meh, I don't really agree with it, but I'll let it slide, So that's one thing that people just pushed around. Another thing I didn't like is when it first started getting big and people were like, oh, you can't support somebody that does not support USARK. I did not like that. So that's when I started like, this is culty. That's what a cult does. It's like you're either with us or you're against us. And it's like, okay, like you're not even trying to keep people. Now, when I talked to Daniel, he made me realize like USARK never said that. People started saying that.
Right, exactly.
And then now people are talking for USARK, And then what I'm getting is people talking for USARK, and I'm getting the idea of USARK as the cult. But also USARK doesn't go, hey guys, like let's not say that, Like let everybody have their own opinions. Let's have our arguments. It brings more eyes, it brings more attention as it is. And certain things like the hunting of the berms, like Daniel disagrees with that, and I don't. Like we have native species in the area. Like we're not getting rid of the berms; they're just there to stay. But we have to help as much as we can. Because
so what is about that their position that it would just be to just kind of let it happen? There's nothing we can do at this point.
Yes, and Daniel was a trapper too. Daniel was a trapper. He just thinks that nature would just, and I'm speaking for him right now. I'm not sure if these are the exact words, but nature would just fix itself, that mammals came back in numbers, that the number of mammals has not gone down as much as they say. And then they're here to stay. There's nothing we can do. I think it is our fault, and we should step in and do something. These animals are being affected. The native animals. And you're a reptile lover, right? Alligators are being affected. American crocodiles are being affected. Indigos are being affected. Pygmy rattlesnakes are being affected. I'll send you some stuff after this. But there are some parasites that come from berms that are affecting our native snakes.
Wow.
Now think of a parasite in a berm. That's a big snake. The parasites are about this big.
Like an inch or so, yeah. That's huge.
That inside of a pygmy rattlesnake would end it.
Yeah.
Inside of a black racer, like we have a lot of smaller native animals that cannot survive those parasites that come from invasive species, including the berm, and some are even specific to the berm.
Right.
So we cannot ignore the effects that those animals have, and we can't just say we cannot hunt them, we shouldn't hunt them. We cannot. Now he's also against people just like the government sometimes does, or FWC does, like a hunting challenge or something, and he doesn't agree with that because a lot of native snakes end up dying in mistake, which I don't have any evidence of that. I don't know. It might be true, it might not. Also, cars driving on those roads, a lot of times snakes are crossing and they run them over, but those parks are open to the public. There's cars driving all the time. I don't know. I just think that's one of the major parts where I disagree with them, and also fear mongering. Whenever they're saying like, oh, they're trying to take all of our animals, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do that, and it's like they're not trying to take all of our animals. They're trying to fix or avoid a problem that we caused.
Yes, yeah.
And their solution is take everything. They take whatever can survive here, take it away. You know, like take that privilege away. Their solution is don't make other laws. You know, make other laws. And it's like we caused the problem. We're not even finding a solution.
Yeah, we're just sort of saying, no, it's not really our fault and we should still be allowed.
Yeah, we should still be allowed to keep whatever we want because it's our right. You know, like, oh, there's people doing good. Absolutely. There's tons of people doing good. There's also tons of people doing horrible things. Like during Operation Viper, people were literally charged for having illegal animals, selling animals illegally that came in legally, and then like releasing animals or talking about releasing animals. Those people have done it. Like those things do happen. But when those things happen, guess what they do? Don't talk about it. It brings a bad light. Don't talk about it. It brings a bad light. When I spoke about it, I got so many DMs not talk about it.
Really? So Operation Viper, can you give people a little rundown of what that was?
Operation Viper is crazy because it's a whole bunch of people that, of course, kept reptiles, sold reptiles, like moved reptiles around. And they got a new friend in their little group. And the new friend happened to be an undercover FWC officer. And he made sure he recorded all of the things that were happening. And he stayed in that group for many years. And then a few years back, he just came out, or they all came out and arrested those people and charged them with whatever they needed to be charged with. So it was an FWC undercover operation.
Wow. And that's not the first time they've done that to the reptile trade. There's several stories of that where people get in our hobby get busted for doing things that we say we don't do. Yeah.
I mean, in the 1900s, late 1900s, I don't remember the year, Operation Chameleon was a thing. And
that's the one I remember. Yeah.
Tom Crutchfield's part of it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's like
that's strictly reptiles. That's the whole. For anyone that wants to know more about that, you go read The Lizard King, and it's all about Operation Chameleon.
Yeah, and it's all there, and it's like okay, y'all did y'all thing. Like back then, it was just like a whole bunch of mistakes people made, and those people accept it now, and hopefully they do. And that's okay. It already happened. I'm not saying like burn the people down, you know, but it's like we gotta be better than that, because if it keeps happening, and then we get the backlash, everybody else pays for you making some money, you know, like
totally.
They're ruining it, and it's not like I'm not saying like they're never gonna be there. We can't get rid of those people either. It will happen, but we don't speak on it. We don't push against it. We stay quiet. Everything is like, don't put a bad light on us. It's a small community as it is, and it's like, motherfucker, like those things come to light regardless.
Yes. And I feel like it's just so much more empowering for us to say, hey, this was something that happened. We don't condone this. Most people don't believe this is the right thing to do. But sweeping things under the rug and hiding them makes us look, I think, a lot weaker and a lot more like like being a trickster almost, and being kind of way more sketchy than we ought to look. Because there's, like you said, there's some amazing people doing some amazing things in the herpetoculture community that are working with species and breeding animals for the very first time that no one, even like, you know, zoos or biology departments aren't able to do. And that all gets overshadowed when we say like, hey, like let's just ignore the Samson thing and say that didn't happen.
Yeah, things like that. Things like, of course, they did the importation of animals, which again, I'm not fully against. It's very species specific for me, because there's some animals that are abundant in the wild, and I'm like, okay, like it is what it is, you know. But there's some animals that are hurting, and we still do it, and it's like, why?
Yeah,
You know, like ball pythons, perfect. Okay, this is another thing I don't like. This just came to my brain. I'm about to rant even more. When people say we got to breed in captivity so we don't hurt the animals in the wild, that's a lie. We still import ball pythons, and then the number one snake we have.
Yeah.
We still affect them. We still import them by the thousands. You know, like it's whenever people say that, I'm like, that's a lie. That's just a cover up to make yourself feel better.
Yeah. Or they actually just don't know. You know,
Yeah, or
which
they
could
don't
be
know, but it's a word of mouth thing.
yeah.
Like I've never heard of it actually like working. That I have never heard of it working. And if it doesn't work on ball pythons, I don't know what to tell you, you know? And then their
Yeah.
excuse is we need new blood. And then from there, the excuse is, well, we're paying families to be able to eat in Africa, but you're paying them cents. If you really want to feed them, why don't you pay even more? If you're selling the animals for thousands over here, it wouldn't hurt.
That's
You know,
a
like,
really good point, because that is one thing that people quite often say. Hey, we're you know, it's a business there. Families are collecting these snakes, but you're so right. They collect them. They pay, you know, for a couple of bucks for a giant pillow sack full of snakes, and then move them over here and sell them because they have potential morphs.
exactly. And it's like all of it is a lie. That's like a lot of the stuff that we do and say as a community are lies that are just passed down word of mouth. Like, but if you actually look into it,
Yeah,
we
there's
still
nothing.
import ball pythons, like, and then you pay barely anything for them to those people that you're trying to feed. I don't know. Sounds sketchy to me.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds self-interested.
Yeah, and like for ball pythons, like if they're doing good in certain areas and you're actually like giving people money and giving them food and like great, great. But also you have to make sure you're not affecting the animal in the wild. And at the same time, if you really care to feed people, if that's really where your heart is at, pay the money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's like how much of a humanitarian are you actually, or do you just use
Yeah,
that line?
it's just an argument that makes them feel better. And then people that hear it are like, oh my God, such a good person. Paid 10 cents for a ball python or whatever it is. Like, come
Yeah.
on, bro.
Yeah.
Like you're not doing anything.
No, that's a great point. And I think that's what's fascinating about someone like yourself is because to me, it seems like you operate a lot more on intuition, especially even the way you work with your animals. Like you talked about, you know, watching the animals, learning from them. That's how you base your care off of, you know, talking about the training, the crocodilians and the monitors and whatnot. And so you have a deep sense of how these animals are, like their essence and nature, and sort of seeing where that doesn't align with herpetoculture, but also at the same time participating in herpetoculture and liking the pet trade, working with the industry on the retail side.
Yeah.
And there's so much that this hobby can do that I think can be positive for the world. It's just we gotta kind of steer the ship in the right direction.
Yeah, there is so much we can do. I'm like I said, I work at a reptile shop. I do their social media. Like I literally see a lot, and in that world, like the best I can do is educate people. And I've seen great people. I've seen people that, like you said, like there's people that can breed anything they touch.
Yeah.
There's people that can breed anything they touch, and I'm like, bro, like how those are great people. I think that's great, and we can learn from those people. And I love that. I love those people. I love people that are actually passionate about what they do. But a lot of times, whenever it just becomes money, I don't really care for that. I don't care for like. There's so many things like hybrids. I don't care about morphs. I don't care about like even the animals you keep. I don't like. I don't care what animal you keep. I don't. I care about how you keep it and you. Like if you're a cool person and you have like great ideas and you're actually smart and you have something to add, if you have something to add, I that's what I like.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know, that's just the way I think, and I think it's kind of harsh sometimes, and like that's why usually people don't like me, and I go above and beyond to make it like I double down on things that I believe in. But I think people just haven't experienced what I have, and I feel like people should, and I wish people did. And
Yeah.
sometimes I try the best I can to show people, like, hey, like these things happen. Or if I see something in the wild, like the black racer, that's a super common snake. You see photos, you see this, you see that. But I was like, let me just show the speed of this thing. And then you thought about it and you were like, imagine keeping that thing.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought when I saw it just zing across the screen. I'm like, man, that's hard to imagine keeping in the 4-foot long enclosure.
But you know how many snakes move like that and are kept like that?
Yeah.
So it's like
Not
that's
just the racer, yeah.
Yeah, I just can't be part of that. Even though again I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. It's like it's hypocritical. And I know it's hypocritical. Like I work with tons of animals. Like I don't keep them the best right now. And I'm like, I'm one of those. I just want people to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we need to move in this direction. Or I need to move in this direction.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It's insane how people just stick to the old ways and that's just the only way of doing things to them. I think that's boring. Like, I don't know, like even working with the same species over, like not having any other species. I'm like, that's all that's all you want to do. It's like branch out, learn. Like I feel like everybody in the hobby loves these animals and would love to learn more. And they're amazed when they learn more, but they don't push themselves to learn more.
So true. Yeah.
If you like, I learn things every day. Last night, I learned that marine iguanas shrink and grow again.
I've never heard that.
Yes, look it up. They shrink and they grow again. They take off like a part of their spine and it comes back.
Wow.
Like, that is insane. I found a turtle the other day, a box turtle. Box turtles are about this big. They're usually yellow. Well, the one I found was about this big and it was black. And I'm like, what am I looking at? I look it up. It's a species that's only found in the panhandle around the Gulf Coast box turtle is what it's called. They're darker in coloration, or they can be brown and have spots of white. And I'm like, why do they all look different? Keep looking into it. Start looking for scientific papers. And some people think they're a hybrid between a common box turtle and an extinct box turtle.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
There you go. Like, if you actually look into these things, you will dive into a whole new world of reptiles and animals.
Totally.
If people drove more into that, and not only reptiles, get into everything else, just learn. That way, when you see the berm, you understand the effects. Because that's another thing. People want to defend the berms, the iguanas, and all those things, but they don't understand. They just know the basics of nature, the environment. If you actually learn it, then you'll be like, okay, I see the problem here.
Mm.
And some people are aware of the problem, but they also want to keep reptiles, so they just keep it hush.
Yes, but it's definitely much harder to ignore the problem when you actually understand it. It's a lot easier to just kind of put the blinders up if you don't fully have a grasp on what's happening. But if you kind of keep yourself naive to it, it's easy to just say, hey, well, I don't know that, so I'm not going to dig into it.
Exactly. I wish people were more into, I think also, like, with social media, and I'm part of social media, so like hypocrite again, but people have become very repetitive on what it is. Like everybody's doing the exact same thing. Everybody's either breeding this thing, breeding that thing, or like even herpers. Like everybody's just getting bit and like yelling and screaming and making staging things and making it extra. And it's like, most of us say that our idol is Steve Irwin, who staged things, by the way, absolutely staged things. But he actually cared for the environment and did something about it. How many of us are doing it? Not many. Not many of us are actually doing that. We are all inspired by him. We all want to be more like him,
But forgetting that important step of
the
conserving
last
the
part.
land.
The last part people are missing. The very last part. I think that's the most important part. Like, keeping is great, finding them great, videoing them great, fucking stage them, But once you make them seem like something they're not, like the extreme bites where people overreact and yell, and you're putting it on social media, everybody else is going to see it.
Yes.
So it's like whenever I get bit, I try my best to act just as natural as possible. Just like I get bit all the time, like on a daily. I work with too many animals not to get bit.
Yeah.
I'm always bleeding. Like it is what it is. But like when I see people like that are just like exaggerating them, I'm like, oh my God, dude, like you could do so much more if you were just actually yourself.
Totally.
And
And that's what's great about your page is it's you have this unique insight into the keeping side and some wildlife as well, and it doesn't seem sensationalized, and it's your page is doing so well that people obviously appreciate that.
yeah, it's so simple. It's so easy. It's so dumb. Like I could make like bite videos all day. I know when I post a video and it's gonna pop. I know when I post a video and it's gonna flop. I just don't care, you know.
Yeah,
And then out of nowhere, out of nowhere, one pops, and I'm like, oh, cool, another one.
Yeah.
You know, does it get into my head sometimes? Absolutely. Sometimes I'm like, oh damn, it has been a minute since I hit some numbers, but then I do, and it's like, oh, I did it again. Cool. I have a video of me catching an iguana in Mexico. It blows up every time I post it. So I post it every few months.
Yeah. People like to see it.
Yeah. Some people do the biting video. They get bit, they yell, blows up, and then you see them repeat it over and over and over and over and over and over and over until it just dies out. You know?
Yeah.
If you don't give people something like, oh, what's this guy's name? God damn it. The Yoink guy. Jesus.
Oh, yes. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Damn, he's gonna be, what's his name? Oh, that's gonna bother me. Like him. Like those are such simple videos.
For anyone that doesn't know, he's kind of like herping or just in the wild, and he just grabs animals off the ground and goes yoink.
That's it.
That's sort of his videos. Yeah.
That's it. So simple. Like,
and they blow up.
And they blow up. Like you don't have to be doing all the crazy stuff, making the animal look bad, hurting the animal, like just any of that. Like you don't have to do it. It's way simpler than that. Way, way simpler than that. Of course, if you do it over and over, you're good. You might blow up and you might get addicted to that. But once you try and do something else, it's not going to work.
And you're going to be stuck having to get bit by snakes for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about some influencers out there, like,
yeah,
that's what they do. Like Coyote Peterson has been getting bit for years.
That's his whole shtick.
If he does anything else, it doesn't pop.
Yeah. They need to see him get stung by a bee or bit by whatever.
If he doesn't do that, you don't watch him. You don't care. Yeah. That's all he is. He's a punching bag. He's a punching bag for animals.
And it goes back to the image that we're trying to portray as a community that loves animals and keeps them at the same time. How do you want outsiders to look at us? Do you want us to look like someone who is kind of wild and screaming and having a snake flying, hanging onto the tip of your finger, or somebody that's actually respecting the nature that they find the animal in and showing some respect?
I think the respect side is the best that I would like people to show more of, but that's not taking away, like, there are some cool things we do. We do some cool shit, bro. Like, we work with animals that people are afraid of,
Yeah.
We find those animals for the herpers. Like, we do some cool stuff. You don't have to exaggerate the stuff we do. It's already cool enough, and if you're funny, 10 out of 10, you got it, like, you got all it takes. I think, like, the bites themselves, like, the overreacting is overdone already. Everybody does that, and it's just gonna die out like everything else. And I'm not saying don't post whenever you get bit. Like, no, like, if you get bit, you get bit. Just be you.
Yeah.
Be you. Just be you around the animal. Like, me as a professional, if I see that you're like, does nothing. You might impress everybody else, but then people that are actually professionals, if you want to do anything professionally, they might not even look at you because of it. You might be closing your own doors because it's like, oh, this guy's just a goof,
it's a gimmick.
Yeah. Like, show me what you can actually do. Can you handle, like, can you actually work a venomous snake? can you actually, like, instead of just telling, like, every video is, this snake bit me, yelling, yelling, yelling. This is what it is. This is what it does. The end. Can you do something different?
Yeah.
You know, like, what do you have? What can you do? What do you know? You know, what's interesting about you? Like, I've heard this, I have many times. Everybody's doing it. But like, what do people have? And those people stand out.
Yes.
And those people stand out for a long time. That's another thing. A lot of people blow up and die out. Those people I see stand out and stay like that. Even people I don't get along with. Like, I'm not just like the people I like. No, I'm talking people I don't even get along with are like that.
Yeah,
like,
just doing the right thing.
Yeah, like, I don't really know the real Tarzan. I've met him like once, but like, that's somebody that hasn't died out. Why? You know?
Yeah. Great
He
point.
started catching iguanas and selling them out of state.
Is that how he started?
That's one of the ways he started, yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And then he would
And now
post
he's
those
huge.
videos. Yeah, and he would post those videos. He worked at Underground Reptiles.
Mm.
He was in the field. He was with everybody else. And whenever he goes out, does he free handle? Yeah. But then he also shows like what he can do with the animal. You know, like a venomous snake. He's showing like he has some potential somewhere. Whenever he gets bit, he's not yelling or nothing. He's looking at the camera with a straight face, and you're like, holy shit. You know, this guy's crazy.
Yeah.
That guy stuck out. And most people hate him. I don't know much about him to hate him. But most people hate that guy in the community. But then do the other videos, you know, and I'm like, I don't know. I think if people show more respect and show themselves more, and what, like, if you could show what you have to add, is very important for social media and for the industry.
Yeah. I think that's so well said, and I think the two biggest pieces of advice that you've given tonight that I think are so valuable. One is get outside, go experience nature, especially if you're keeping animals. This is just so crucial. And the second thing is, what we do in reptile keeping is fascinating, and it is so cool, and there's so much we can do. And so just highlight that. We don't have to exaggerate the parts of our hobby that are maybe a little bit ugly, or like the biting and the scary parts, because the people who aren't keeping reptiles are already scared of the tarantulas and the spiders and the snakes and the lizards. So if we can show, we bred the species for the first time and this is what the babies look like, or all those amazing things, or being able to understand the behavior of a snake or whatever it is, I think that's what's going to move our hobby forward, into the future, rather than kind of getting stuck on this like sensationalism.
Yeah, and that is what other industries do. Just the animal industry doesn't do that. And I'm like, don't you see what everybody else is doing? Like hunters, whenever they go for hunters, what's their excuse? Well, we pay for conservation.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's like, okay, what the fuck are we doing? Just arguing back and forth with these people.
Yeah,
you need something like, okay, like you're pointing out my flaws, but look at what I'm providing. We don't have that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, that I think is a real perfect way to wrap up, and just, I think that's a great piece of advice. Is there anything that we didn't mention today that you wanted to, before I'll get you to plug your social media as well, but before we do that, is there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't get to tonight?
Not really. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. I mean, you're a very fascinating person. Like I said, you have this sort of this intuition about reptile keeping and the reptile trade in general and just animals. And I think you definitely said some truths that people don't like to hear, but are really important for us to hear. Can you tell everybody where your social media is and anything else that you have online as far as where they can keep track of you?
Yeah, so everything's usually MadBio Reptiles on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, even though I haven't posted there in a while. But I will start soon. Instagram's the number one for me. So MadBio Reptiles there. And then the content's pretty much all sorts of things, from being a zookeeper, working with tons of reptiles, crocodilians, monitors, venomous snakes, all sorts of things. Also finding things in the wild and just my daily life, honestly.
Awesome. Well, Chuckey, thank you for being on the show. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and we will definitely have to do this again at some point in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Chuckey, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Like I said through the intro, I'm sure some people are frustrated with some of the things you had said on the show tonight, but I think for the most part, if not everything you said was hitting the nail on the head, and it was fascinating to hear your side and your perspective for things. I think there's some great advice for people. Get outside. Let's show the people who are not within our hobby how amazing this hobby is and how incredible we are at keeping these animals and understanding them and working with them. And let's start to try to eliminate some of that sensationalism, but also simultaneously take some of the responsibility for some of the things that maybe have not been great, you know, the invasive species and whatnot, or wild-caught imports and things along those lines. So anyway, listeners, if you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you share it around on social media. That really does help bring new listeners to the podcast. If you would like to support the show financially, you can do that at patreon.com/animalsathome. There you'll have early access to episodes, and you'll be automatically added to the Discord server. And again, of course, that money goes directly towards making sure the show gets produced on a weekly or close to weekly basis. You can also check out customreptilehabitats.com. They are an affiliate sponsor, so if you click on the link in the YouTube description or the show notes, you'll be taken to their website, and if you make a purchase, a commission comes back to me at no extra cost to you. Consider subscribing on YouTube and Spotify. Of course, those are free platforms where you can listen and watch the show. Spotify, for those of you who are not aware, does offer the video version, so you can watch the podcast on Spotify as well. A big thank you for the sponsors of the podcast this week. Thank you to Liam Sinclair from Reptiles Research for editing this podcast, and I will catch everybody in the next episode.